been over it a little bit 4,000 times. Yeah, all of the people in this room who knows what they're talking about, you're at the top of the list.
All right. Good afternoon, commissioners, and over to you, Chair Harrington.
Thank you, Clerk Moss, and welcome everyone to the Tuesday, November 19th, 2024 Washington County Board of Commissioners work session. This is Chair Catherine Harrington, and in the room we have Vice Chair Commissioner Nafisa Faye, Commissioner Pam Trees, Commissioner Roy Rogers, and joining us by Zoom while on vacation, we have a dark figured Commissioner Mary Willie
in the blue sky.
There you go. That got your camera focus on you. Thank you.
That's just oh my
Lots
God.
of envy in the room as we're mixing off with a, what's it called? A bomb cyclone?
Yes.
Rainstorm. So the National Weather Service Portland Facebook page has a really cool satellite image that our team has shared out on the Washington County Facebook page as well. It's pretty cool looking. So we have a full afternoon agenda. Thank you very much, everyone, for accommodating the 1 o'clock start time so that we could turn it over to our expert team here to talk about the state of affairs with the SHS measure reform going on with Metro Council President Peterson.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Board. I'm Erin Doyle, your Senior Government Relations Manager, and with me is
Molly Rogers, Director of Housing Services.
I apologize that we got all of this information into the packet and to your board so late, literally so late, 5-10 minutes ago. But we have been working really hard, particularly Molly and her team, to compile a lot of information. So the PowerPoint presentation is, we're going to go through the very beginning of it very quickly because it's a repeat of the information we shared on the 12th. What's updated within this PowerPoint presentation so that we can share with multiple partners is the revenue impacts from the proposed scenarios. To level set for just a moment, as your board is aware, Metro passed a resolution directing their staff to come back for a recommendation on a measure reform concept. After that, a table was created for specific people by the Metro Council President Peterson to work through both the revenue and the governance structures. We have been included in that conversation, and we were requested at last meeting, Chair Harrington was requested to bring back information that we've been working to put together, which is what's included in the revenue impacts based on a brand new scenario to the conversation, but not a new scenario from Metro's point of view. Essentially, that scenario resets how much funding comes to the counties based on resetting it back to $250 million for all 3 counties to share using the current proportions that are in the current IGA. So that means Washington County receives a third of that $250 million. In the next year, that $250 million is, the cap is increased by 3.5%, which is I think it's 3.5%. We're still waiting for their assumptions to be emailed out to us so that we can do proper math based on their actual numbers. We were expecting to receive those this morning. We still have not seen them. Based on that cost escalator at 3.5% is what I'm going to call it. That is the county share over the life of the proposed reform measure, which would last out until 2050. The next band of funding would go to cover Metro. It would be the cost to collect the revenue, so which is approximately $11 million that goes to the city of Portland to collect the tax, as well as the continuation of the 5% of overall collected revenues going to Metro. No cap, no escalator on their share. And then on top of that, all remaining dollars that are collected through the revenue collection process go into what I have called a flexible fund, which would go to these new proposed additional uses of the development of affordable housing and a direct city allocation process. How those allocations are made out of that flexible fund were not discussed. I would imagine they'll reserve that to the governance part of the conversation, which is expected to take place in December, or maybe they'll talk about it on Thursday. We'll find out. But that means that all of the volatility within the funding sits on the shoulders of our city partners and the affordable housing development community as opposed to the counties. However, what we are seeing there is that much like our property tax system, we have a set number of dollars based on a number that we started with, and we have a minimal escalator that is not related to the cost to serve or the cost to pay rent. So as a result of that, we drafted a letter which has been handed out to those in the room, but emailed out to the commissioners at the same time, about 10 minutes before the meeting started. It will also be added to the packet. It is the focus of what I hope you all can give feedback on so that we can get it finalized or not, or work with the chair to finalize and have it under her signature. So with those opening remarks, I'll turn it over to Molly to talk about what that scenario looks like for what reductions we would have to take and how her and her team using those draft guiding principles have prioritized the potential cuts to our ongoing service position.
Oh, that's not loaded there, Erin, but I will say, we did talk about this last week. And I'm going to skip through a lot of these slides because we're already grounded in what we've built out, where we've built it, and some of the governance changes. I just want to, for the record, to say that feels like it's been a moving target of what we are being asked to present in terms of service reduction impacts. So that, and just as a little bit of context, for every facility we have built out, a shelter or transitional housing or project turnkey, those operating costs tend to be around $1 million to $2 million. So with each, let's just say, with each reduction of say 5 million, we are talking about closure of some portion of said kind of sites. You don't close down per bed, you close down per site. That being said, we also do a lot of working to support people in market rate housing. That has been the most responsive and most effective way to get people immediately into housing. But those are the kinds of rent escalations that we see higher than the 3.5%. We have to actually model those closer to 5 to 10% of rent increases. So there's just a lot of pieces, variables that go into this kind of impact analysis. And I just wanted to start us at, we talked a little bit about the different scenarios. Last week, we had to do a range of 1 to 27 million. Well, when we talk about our baseline cuts in addition to this, and then as we start honing in, this is where more updated information we believe today, although it will probably change this afternoon when we get more information from President Peterson. But just to ground us a little bit, we passed a budget of 120 million of SHS funding. That included the 115 in forecast, 5 million in contingency funding. We are looking to make some ramp down reductions this year and next fiscal year to get us closer to $105 million base budget. But we also are still building out our system. We have partners closing on shelters. We have partners wanting to open access centers. We have partners wanting to build permanent supportive housing that we have made commitments to. We have partners who want to build transitional housing in our community. So there's a long way of saying this is a moving target, and the shakeout of this is likely not to be fully known for the next couple years. But we're doing our best in estimating what I'm calling what the system is going to, once fully built, needs to be right-sized. We know what we're trying to understand is the fully functional system and the annual operating expenses to maintain that system in $25, $26 when we are being asked to look at potential impacts of a revenue measure for next year. We just paused there. It looks like maybe you might have a question.
Yes, I just want to make sure I'm anchored on the right term. With Metro President Peterson saying 250 million a year with a 1/3 allocation, is the term right-sized where you think that allocation target is?
Now, the
'Cause
right,
if it isn't, then I'm not caught up in. So you've been trying to build a sustainable system, right?
Mhm.
So is right-sized that sustainable system, and we're still trying to figure out how to get to this $70+ million reduction system, for lack of a better term.
I'm using maybe right-sized in two different, maybe not quite, maybe interchangeable here. When I say right-sized for 25, 26, that's agnostic to the reform package. That's what we need to start looking at to address our collections trending, and the impacts we need to, the reductions we need to make, just so that we are not overspending what we think we're going to collect. And so that's that 10 to $15 million reduction we've been talking about, that we need to immediately right size this year and next fiscal year, sort of those ramp down
Got it.
reductions.
Okay.
So when I say right size the next row, which what I really mean there is, how do I anticipate what we're going to need on an annual basis once all this infrastructure is fully built out?
Yep.
But I need to do it in $25, $26.
Yep.
So that whatever Metro is asking us to reduce down in that fiscal year, we know what we need to eventually be budgeting towards, and understand that 3.5 isn't going to get us there on an escalation
And
in
I
today's dollars.
didn't internalize that the Metro figure that they're trying to get us down to for fiscal year 26 is approximately 88 million.
So that's,
So you've got
Yep.
us on a trajectory of where we were with our starting year 4 budget and trying to land it down, knowing that we have these other commitments at the same time.
yep. So there's a lot of
Yep.
moving pieces, and what our understanding, but subject to change based on the charts from Metro, was being asked to see what the system would look like at an $88 million annual operating budget at the fiscal year 26.
Yep.
So I need to compare that number where system is really going to need once it's built. Yep. And absorb the reductions we're already going to need to make. Yep. So just wanted to start there. It's grounding.
Thank you.
Yep. And then we updated the guiding principles based on the feedback you gave us last week, making sure we were clear that overarching goals on Pot A being 75% of funding, Pot B at 25%. We talk about, we want to apply an equity lens. We're not ensuring equity, but we're going to apply, we're doing the best we can to avoid exacerbating racial disparities. We're going to continue to strive to maintain a balanced system. So we continue to have those throughputs for wherever people are at. Their eventual goal will be permanent housing. We want to honor and keep the commitments we've made for those partners that have built or purchased capital and investments, so that they know they can rely on us for future operations. The other one I added in was making sure we continue, I put in, keep some investment in the system for what I'm putting in cost-effective strategies to prevent homelessness in the first place.
Yep.
That seemed to be really key. And that's how we adapted that slide.
Ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
The first point, our focus on Pop A and B, as you reduce the amount of available funds, does that in fact cause you to relook at that 25-75 split?
That's an excellent question, Commissioner, because I've done this math now 1,000 times. And yes, it does. It's quite sensitive and how so I'll put it this way. The triage set of reductions is meant to honor that proportionality
Right.
with the three throughputs in a balanced system. But because of how the math works, it can kind of swing by like 5% in a fairly arbitrary way. So how do you apply A and B when you have a shelter and you don't know if someone is coming to you in either A or B? So you just apply a 50-50 when you do the math. So that's what I mean by arbitrary.
Okay.
But what in my mind, this really ought to reflect the permanent solutions we're creating. So permanent housing, permanent solutions. In my mind, that's where the pop A and B ought to be
I see that.
split between 75-25, not the shelters, not all the outreach, not all the other permanent solutions. So that's where it gets fairly a little bit arbitrary.
I really appreciate these updates to the guiding principles. Before we move on, are there any other board questions, or are you comfortable with these updated guiding principles as they stand?
I'll jump right in. Molly, thank you I feel like this is taking up a lot of our time, but you're doing a great job to all of you staff who are managing this topic and balancing the future impacts this will have. Even, we say the system, but really this really impacts people and this is making a difference. I appreciate the updates that you've made to these principles. I am wondering, I think we talked about last time eviction prevention. And then we talked about how do you, sounds like there is a principle around from shelter to housing, but I think the supportive housing services measure is ultimately addressing chronic homelessness, which includes getting people from the streets to housing. So where does that fit in here?
Yeah, that's where we are striving to prioritize the permanent supportive housing solutions for population A, for those who have been on the streets for the longest and have disabling conditions or at risk of falling into that category. So that's when we are going to make some really difficult choices, and we're going to have to look at trade-offs. You will have to grapple with this very question. What's the right proportionality between what I'm non-permanent solutions to permanent solutions? What do we know when something is balanced? For me, it does tie a little bit back to, we have to keep track of how many people are getting stuck in shelters or getting stuck in motels or our pod villages and have no opportunities to get into permanent housing thereafter.
Or importantly, those that we would otherwise outreach and move from unsheltered into sheltered. If we don't have space in that shelter, we can't commit to trying to bring them in until we can create the movement of those people from where they are to the next stage. So that is also part of the consideration. I think Molly's, the next slides will bear out.
So we've seen we've talked about these slides before. This is us trying to go through the myriad of potential reductions in a triaged fashion. We're trying to slow down. There's not that much change from last time, but I did add in I believe Commissioner Willie asked to look at what would be the sort of worst case scenario, at least what we thought would be worst case last week, which would be a reset to 250 million. Again, it gets, I'm not sure we had the updated slides. That's right. We do start looking at more closures of shelter, more closures of access centers, and project turnkey. It does mean there's some immediate questions I will get to in a little bit about, we've got projects right now ready to go. How do we contemplate those? We've got people seeking housing right now with a VARLA ARLA voucher in their hand and they're shopping and they're seeking housing right now, we need to think about, if we get into worst case scenario, right now, it's better to not support someone than to pull back assistance. So those are some of the real immediate sort of trade-offs we have to contemplate. We've got bond projects out there that are willing, that want our SHS commitments to pay for services, security, enhanced resident services, and they frankly need those commitments to close. Or they have to essentially revert to a straight up 60% AMI affordable housing project, where we would then not have access for those experiencing homelessness into that housing. Okay, so just trying to taking a step back, what this all means when we've been grappling with the various moving pieces of the latest proposal as we understand it from last Thursday is, I think it's just reality that because SHS is the vast majority of our whole homeless services system, any cuts will feel severe and feel we'll feel them deeper because we don't have a diversified set of other funding streams that can more absorb or think about leverage. So we're a little bit exposed, and so we will feel those cuts, I think, a little bit deeper. There appears to be perceptions that there's ways we can just easily divert, just sort of, the notions that our budgets include all kinds of capital investments and operating expenses, which is true. We do a comprehensive budget, but that's why we are starting to present to you a clear delineation between our base annual operating budget and the budget that is based on our one-time only or uses of our carry forward. I think there is, I think it's just cleaner and easier I think we can all appreciate the complexity that our budget process can present, but it does mean that's why we're looking at all these scenarios that strips out the capital investments that we have yet to make. And then there's a lot of questions, I think, that remain around who's ultimately responsible for the system that we are building out, if there's a shift in where the funds are being allocated, or who's responsible for making those decisions on future investments. Worst case scenario, it is no matter how many ways I do the math, it feels it's a general contraction of close to half of the system we built out. So we're talking 40 to 50% of our overall capacity. When I say capacity, that's the units, that's the beds, that's the vouchers, that's the households we are supporting with these resources. And when I generally have approached this by a deeper cutting to the Pop B services than Pop A. So Pop A is more like 25%, Pop B is deeper. And we have to, I'm hoping we don't have to get to this place, but we have made, we have purchased project turnkey motels. We have used executive order resources to buy pod villages. There is a question of, is there a different use of those funds, or are we not fully leveraging the resources that we have been granted by other sources? And those are great uses of one-time only or biennium resources. And the whole point of SHS is that they could sustain the operations for that. So as operations contract, we have less need for more of that infrastructure. So it's interrelated. And I think that's a key point where where we have to find that, how we talk about balance in our homeless system, we have to think about balance in our overall housing and homeless system. And that's why we believe the idea of bifurcating our future capital investments from those who are making services and operating decisions is a mistake. I think it essentially creates a more disjointed system and leaves more, you have multiple boards with multiple priorities having to then come together and line up when those solicitations happen. And I think that will lead to project delays, frankly. So I do talk about how we go too far on diverting too much of the funds towards just affordable housing. It will leave, it could, one of the ironies is that we need to make, it could mean affordable housing that our own Pop A and B cannot actually access, because those are the folks who need services and rent assistance to get access even into affordable housing.
Who would be accessing them?
They'll be available to households that are earning 60% of area median income and below, which on today's dollars for a family of 4, I will have to get back to you. It's I don't have it on top of my head. I normally do though. It's at 70 something thousand. So it's generally working families. Yeah. And then we need to make sure it'd be hard to deal with multiple competitions. And I think our developer friends would also appreciate not having to go through multiple rounds of competition if we don't have an aligned system. The other piece where if we start having to contract our shelter capacity and other counties are, let's say, are not, don't take that same approach, it can help it perpetuates some of the disproportionality that we have seen historically, that we have some communities providing that first line of defense in a deeper way than other communities. So we got to think about that proportionality regionally as well.
So I'm hearing that as the regional coordination in achieving goals is lost.
It just, as we're making our, since we're 96% of our budget and we only have so many choices for reductions, and if we have to think about prioritizing permanent housing and we're starting to reduce our investments in temporary, but other counties are have have more shelter beds per capita, it can perpetuate that disparity where you have more people who are experiencing unsheltered helplessness needing to go to those counties that have more shelter. Sorry if that's a long way of saying.
We're back to exporting the problem.
Exactly.
Instead of owning the problem in each of the 3 counties. We export to those who have differently configured. Yep.
Those are my thoughts over the last few days.
The last bullet.
Yeah, I did talk about the loss of efficiency when you have multiple decision makers.
I don't want to, yeah, you did earlier, yes.
Yeah, I jumped around a little bit, but
But there's a second page.
and yet, and 2 more slides just to make you aware. Here are some of the real potential impacts in a more immediate fashion that are both combined based on our collections issue as well as some of the reform, because again, like I said, we're creating, it's very dynamic, the investment we're building. And so we don't want to make it worse later on of folks who are housing.
So I'll just suggest that just looking at this real briefly, I want the title to be longer because now this focuses on people and partners, the impact to them.
Yes.
Whereas the other seemed more program impact. This is people and partner impact.
Thank you for that. And we have our partners in our room and they're here watching and listening and advocating and also fearful.
We're not doing this because we want to, folks. This is in reaction to Metro changing things in working with Portland Metro Chamber and here together. I get to say that versus staff.
So when we start thinking about eviction prevention, that most affects our one of our 2 biggest partners, Community Action and Centro Cultural. We also, when we think about our motel voucher program, that's our Project Homeless Connect and Community Action. partners. It will affect how we were planning to partner with the public safety levy. So Aaron, I haven't had a chance to even talk to you about that yet.
Yeah, thank you.
It means taking money from those who are in employment services. So that's about 30 participants with work systems. Commissioner Rogers and I are on that board. So this one hurts as well. We would need to, we are funding three cities for liaison staffing. If they create a city program, we would recommend that those funds be diverted to that program. We were hoping to launch a new shallow rent assistance program to help people who just needed a few, on some rent assistance to stay housed. Those were 500 potential households. We will no longer be able to, well, there were potential, we hadn't launched it. So this is just a loss to our system. Or we need to likely explore the next year closing down a pod village. That affects Open Door and also the cities where those are located. And Project Turnkey were motels with the potential opportunity to convert to affordable housing. I think we should accelerate that plan and think about ways to convert one sooner than later, if not two. If there are resources for PSH, of course, we have to compete for capital resources for PSH. That makes it less likely for us to do that. And unfortunately, we will no longer have capacity building funds for our culturally specific organizations that we've been standing up to help them grow and come to Washington. I can get the names of those like.
So doesn't that one have an asterisk next to it relative to the regional infrastructure funding and one of the goals from TCPB?
Because the regional infrastructure funding would be rolled up into that flexible fund, and that would be presumably controlled by a singular body in a competitive process. The ability for us to directly fund to culturally specific organizations that serve the Washington County population is no longer in our hands and would be at a regional table, and we would be competing with other organizations that have not traditionally worked in our county.
Yep.
So this could be transferred to a metro role. Yeah. That would be ideal. Okay, so here's what we're living with today in this moment of uncertainty. We had already made the decision as a board and as staff to not move forward with a motel that we had under contract. It was a sizable motel, so it was going to be a sizable acquisition, and it's going to be a renovation to convert it to residential code, but we are foregoing that opportunity. We are
Money on that?
no, we didn't. We did not. No, we did not put any hard money down. And then additionally, we are preparing to present to you a recommendation to fund an access center in Western Washington County on December 3rd. And we made a verbal commitment to also issue a NOFO for one more access center in Beaverton. Hillsborough is here today in the audience, and they're presenting to their board today about funding of their Hillsborough shelter, which we're excited about. It's also it's dependent on SHS to fund its operations. We also did back in the spring, as you recall, we did a transitional housing NOFO. We recognize that there are some segments of especially the A population that need a transitional housing setting prior to even going into permanent supportive housing. And that's the transitional housing, ironically enough, is the hardest housing intervention to find funding for, because HUD does not prioritize it anymore, and we don't really see a whole lot coming from the state. So SHS is a great use for transitional housing. We are we were then gearing up to make 2 award recommendations to you on December 3rd. The time sensitivity on that is that our partners have purchase and sale agreements locked in and time sensitive. We've got PSH units that we've made commitment for some of our bond projects remaining, the ones that are sort of about to close or have yet to finish pre-development. So we have to look at those commitments. And then frankly, the hardest one for me is we have 244 households that are currently out there looking for housing with an RLA voucher and with case management. And there's another 331 households that are waiting to be enrolled in order to get their voucher. And the 244 are looking for housing now, and we were hoping that they would be finding housing in the next 1 to 2 months. So depending how deep these cuts could go in terms of our ongoing new baseline we're supposed to adhere to, it's hard to not see some scenario where we're reducing the amount of folks who can utilize an RLA voucher. So with that, we are here to seek guidance and also answer your questions, but also to seek guidance of how do we navigate through this moment of uncertainty. We think we will learn more over the next couple weeks. I'm going to recommend that we talk to our partners about how do we move forward from a board perspective, but also add in contingency language. Depending on what gets referred may affect whether they can actually realize the purchase and sale agreement and or execute contracts on construction.
So if I could, Commissioner Willie, we can't see you on the screen. There, now we have you. Can we check in with you first to see if you've had any questions thus far? Because since I couldn't see you, I couldn't tell if you were waving your hand or raising your hand.
No, thank you, Chair. I was listening to the entire presentation intentionally because I have outlined just a number of things that are consistent with what Molly and Aaron are talking about. And, you know, my takeaway from the meeting last week was that a couple of things. I don't think Here Together understands what it is that we've accomplished, what it is that we're doing, what it costs to sustain this and keep it functional. I think their total focus is funding affordable housing, and their statement a couple of times was you can't end homelessness if you don't have housing. So they are coming at it from exact opposite direction that we are. I also recall that at the end of the meeting, President Peterson said, I want a scenario where the cap is less than 250. Less than 250. So we're struggling with even what 250 looks like, and I don't think she's reached her floor yet. And the reason why is if you look at that graph, Chair, that you and I saw up there, both of us took pictures on it. It's really hard to see, but that Brian Kennedy put together. If you look at that, there's a whole bunch of affordable housing money that is available over the next 20 plus years till we get to 2050. And then if you keep the housing services, the homeless services that we're doing capped at 250 plus 3.5%, that's not sustainable either. It's kind of like us trying to live on the 3% property tax increase when inflation is considerably higher than that. We're going to encounter the same thing with this program. So every year we're going to be looking at cuts. I don't know, Molly, where you used an $88 million allocation on a 250 cap. That math doesn't work for me. I think it's less than 88. I mean, if you take 250 and you take the collection costs and all that stuff, and then I'm thinking 70 might be actual numbers. So I'd be interested to see how you came up with that 88 number. And there's a whole bunch of things, so I don't want to take up too much time on this. I don't know exactly how to summarize, and I haven't read the letter yet. But my communication to Molly and Aaron was, please write our response letter in the same format that the Here Together letter is, so it's almost point for point as we go down that. And then lastly, probably not lastly, but lastly for this moment is Here Together and Portland Business Chamber have given at the end of their letter a whole list of logos of companies that they say endorse it. And to me, I looked at that and I said, I don't see a lot of private businesses endorsing this. I see a lot of nonprofit businesses endorsing this who probably have some sort of gain potential in the conversion to an affordable housing and all the other things that we're talking about. And so, I mean, I was very, very negative when I saw that list. And then again, the governance thing is we lose total control. And as Molly pointed out a few minutes ago, we'll be dealing with organizations that are coming out of Portland that have never worked with Washington County or worked with us on our homelessness over the last couple of years. So it'll be a totally different game. So I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't see anything good in this. But I also feel like we are coming to bat with two strikes. So sorry I threw all that out there at once.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. We have 4 more of us in the room for asking questions and seeking comments. And then we also need to wrap up on the letter. And I'm mindful of the fact that we have another topic that is slated to start within 17 minutes.
If I could briefly answer where we got to the 88 million, it was on the presumption that it's 250 million for the counties and all of the metro costs and costs to pay for all of those things sat on top of that from their diagram. It's impossible to read, and that is an assumption. We'll confirm when we get the information from Metro.
And yes, and also there's 250 million from the start of the program. So there's at least an escalator each year for that FY26 figure. So that's why it's not back down to the original 70 million-ish. So, but like has been said many times, Metro has not delivered that information. So we don't know how many of the things go up into the purple, but also from their diagram that they showed on Thursday, that purple wouldn't actually start building until next fiscal year. So it's was just a diagram, as was said multiple times in that meeting. So Commissioners Fye, Teresa, and Rogers, thoughts, questions? Seeing no questions.
Go ahead.
We are talking, and in the presentation today is focused on the effects of the county, not necessarily questions related to what we heard from Here Together. Am I correct here?
This was the calculations that were done were in response to the scenario information that was provided by Metro. The Here Together letter it speaks to all the pieces that I also included in the draft for your consideration. There's pieces on governance, revenue reform, additional uses. The presentation today, however, focused on the scenario
Financial impact.
the financial impacts and that alone, which is somewhat reflected in the letter. But while Molly and I are working simultaneously, we don't necessarily have the hard numbers. We would, of course, include the packet if your board directed us to further tell that story.
Then I will defer to other questions on the financial piece.
My comments are much the same as Commissioner Willie. I'd simply say that this is a pretty frustrating exercise for me. I'm not as attuned to it as some of our board liaisons who are deeply involved, but it seems a bit like we're negotiating with ourselves, honestly. I really don't know what authority or what really we can do to change much of anything. We're pretty forceful of this. I was concerned this entire time whether or not it might change to be a situation where those who provide the services and those who have the most expertise would no longer guide the program. And that's exactly what's happening. You have other folks who are stepping into that. So it's disappointing at best. I'll let that stand for it. I have at my time reading your letter, I have several issues on it, and I'll share those when you're ready for those.
I too really appreciated what Commissioner Willie said. And for you all staff hanging in there in this journey, I don't really have any questions for you two. Speaking from my own value, obviously I've seen the last 4 years, the positive impact this program yield for this county, and I've seen in the news for other counties, the positive impact it had on people in general for the Tri-County. So I value this program, and I value keeping the good work that we're doing, keep building the system that we're building. I also do value affordable housing because that's also part of the equation to really, and housing is a human right. So I think I'm in this weird situation of let's focus on like, how do we get the most money out of this conversation, and how do we facilitate a space to say we have built a system that costs this much, and this much is how much we're willing to scale it down. And if we scale it down, yes, you have 5 board commissioners here. We are here to make those hard decisions. At the end of the day, when Metro says we're going to cut this program in Washington County, you've got $88 million, figure it out. You'll come back to us and we will make the decision, and it will be up to this board to say, we can't fund culturally specific this. We can't do rent assistance. We can't do eviction prevention. Those are all going to be hard questions that we will face here. But I think my hope in this conversation is really to get Washington County the most money we can out of this whole conversation. And I'm with you on that journey. But if the conversation becomes about affordable housing versus homelessness, I feel like as somebody who lived in low income housing, that is not a way that builds a community that says we are in this together, in this problem solving. So I would appreciate the conversation to focus on how do we get the most money rather than affordable housing, this and that. And when it comes to this letter, I have not read this letter, so I'm not sure I can meaningfully contribute to the impact of this. So I'll keep out of it unless we're going to come back and have a conversation about the content of this letter.
Okay, so thank you very much for putting this presentation together. I know it's been wrestling the concepts that we've had to consider and that I've worked with you on as the board liaison to this very topic. I think we do need to turn our attention to the letter. You've put it together really well based upon our work session of last week with regard to reviewing the resolution that puts the HPEC proposal together, as well as absorbs all of the moving targets that Metro has been asking the counties to think about. Council President Peterson has asked us to come up into the meeting this Thursday with very finite, discrete policy choices for what we will provide with the limited dollars. And the Tri-County chairs discussed her most recent email just last evening and are in agreement that it's not a reasonable request, that dealing with a funding level below the voter approved measure with that, the forecast that accompanied it is a non-starter. And I remain steadfast that we should not be enumerating that, because a lot of minds went into putting together the original measure based upon decades of experience with HUD and with state revenues and with innovative techniques of the time. So this draft letter is our attempt to document the work of today's work session as well as the prior work session. If we don't give a thumbs up on this letter today, barring direction on changes, then there are two choices. One is, as the liaison, I provide the letter under my signature with whoever wants to join in that. The other is, we do not have a board meeting again until December 3rd, I believe it is, which will be after meeting number 3 of 4 with Metro Council President Peterson. Therefore, we will have missed the political timeline that is going on. It's not lost on me that the front page of today's Oregonian talked about or featured the year 3 annual reports. So time is of the essence. So while I have not had the opportunity to read the full letter, I have had the opportunity to read the first full section. I trust your description of service reductions, expanded uses, and increased competition, as well as governance based upon these 2 work sessions. I have read your conclusion, and it is right on point. So I am 100% thumbs up in approving this letter.
Thank you, Chair. And we will, of course, go in and fix all the typos I've caught in the meantime.
Other commissioners with regard to the letter?
Yeah, I have a few things. Again, having not been as intimately as involved in this particular topic as other commissioners, I won't get too much into the wordsmithing. I think when you start, and I'm scanning, not getting all the content. I mean, when you start on page 4, that's really the nub of why it's important to us. I mean, it's a very lengthy, wordy letter, which maybe that's what you need, but I mean, really when you start getting into what does it mean to us, and that's why I think it's important, but you can put that where you might think is best. On page 2, down under service reductions, the second paragraph says we recognize that counties are not on the same page as other We mean as each other? Is that what,
As other stakeholders, I'm happy to make that
okay, as other stakeholders? Okay. On the page 3, where it says expanded uses and increased competition, that's a strange use of the word competition. I don't know that you meant it that way.
Where,
Good.
right.
Right here.
ah,
I wish I had in such a short
page
period of
3,
time.
the heading.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
I don't know if there's a better way to wordsmith that so it doesn't sound like it's competitive. I mean, it's not really what you,
It is, in fact, what we meant, because we are competing. The way we understand that flexible fund to work is it is not a direct allocation to this housing provider gets X number of dollars, this city gets X number of dollars. It is, there is this many dollars around.
who are
Who
we,
wants it?
Metro,
Maybe
And
it's
then-
change in allocation.
but who are we competitive with?
This-
everyone.
Anyone who puts in for those funds. I mean, obviously pursuant to whatever the advisory council creates as the purpose and intent. Again, that is not in Washington County control. So at least
If I could describe, if I could share what has been described thus far.
Sure.
It has been described that the counties could apply for a grant for a new shelter. The cities could apply for a grant for a new permanent shelter or for the kinds of ideas that they've talked about wanting reimbursement for now. CBOs could put in applications. Business groups could put in applications. So that's where the word competition comes in. In addition, they also want to have affordable housing projects compete for those same dollars. So it really is.
Competition for funds.
Yep.
It's also the bigger issue is the bifurcating the capital investment from those who are operating and providing services for those same investments. So they could put out resources for a shelter, but that same entity is going to have to come back to the county to come up with a plan for how to fund those operations or the state. And if we're already capped out in how we're spending that operate those services, then we lose out on an opportunity to do those those investments. It's better, and the system has worked really long and hard in Multnomah County, where you have 3 different government bodies making different decisions on one project. So essentially, it goes back to that system where you're now having multiple government bodies making a decision on whether to invest for the long term in an investment, as opposed to a county having the flexibility to say, we can make sure that it's sustained and that investment is sustained with operations.
So did you have anything else?
One more.
Okay.
I understand the word, and no, I mean, that's up to you guys. I don't like the word. I think it should be either Pam suggested for funds or something more descriptive. And again, we ought to be opposed to that. I mean, that should be what we're opposed to. But in the last page 4, the last conclusion, about the 3rd sentence down, it says, because we have not seen our budget information. What did you mean by that? That doesn't,
Their projection.
that's better. Did you hear that?
Well, we have no clarity on their proposals.
But your wording is better than.
Well, but it's not just their forecast. We have
I understand.
received no clear proposal from them.
It says we have not seen our budget information.
So I think
Your-
let me clarify what was intended by that sentence, and I will rework what I meant by that. Essentially, I am reiterating the fact that I stated at the top of the letter that we have tried to tell you what our budget is multiple ways, and we have not seen the information that we have provided into this process impact the conversation that is being had at that table. So we're kind of tired of telling you our budget is fundamentally spent to do the work we were told to do and not have an impact on the conversation. That is me expressing what I have heard to be the board's frustration with this ongoing.
It's just odd.
I'm happy
A
to rework
layperson,
that.
I mean, whatever you guys think, it's just odd to read it.
I'm happy to rework that to make that clearer.
That's it.
I'm going to go to Jerry or.
Jerry, go ahead.
Thank you. The only comment I was going to make is a request to give me a couple of hours to read this more thoroughly, as just like Roy's, I did that. So I could say, if you give me till 5 o'clock and you don't hear from me, and then I'm fine signing on it. But that something as detailed and as critical as this, I'd like to have the opportunity to read it thoroughly.
Yes, I think all of us would.
Oh, my comments are, I think the third paragraph is about, on the front page, is about local control. You don't use the word local control, but that's what that is about. And that's one of the primary issues that I think we have here. So, and maybe there's a different word for local control, but I'd just like to see it really emphasize, we are the ones that know what the community needs, and the structure with the reduction as well as the changing governance removes that opportunity. I do like
Well,
the,
it might be not only, instead of putting it there, it might be a message worth adding into the closing, because local control and on the ground needs here in the greater Washington County community.
I think that's a good idea. And I think it's important enough that it is reiterated as well. So in scanning this letter, I can support it. I will read it more closely after I support it, but it is, that's where I sit. And I thank you for doing this. This is hard work. It's been, it's a lot to do in a short period of time. But I think we need to make sure that we're clear and direct about what the issues are that we face moving into a new day that might look like this measure defines.
Commissioner Fine?
I said my piece about the letter. I'm not ready to sign off or give thumbs up. I need to read through and figure out the content.
Okay, so we have two of us that are ready to sign on with discussion points. And so is Commissioner Willie. I'm having
We
a
look-
terrible
we
time with
look alike.
names
I get
today. Commissioner Rogers, so we'll make updates to that. I'll sign it on behalf of the board. If you have thoughts for staff and they can be accommodated by the end of the day, that includes you, Commissioner Willie, then great, staff can do that. So. Okay. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
As we continue this journey. Okay, onward to the Beaverton Cooper Mountain Community Plan Transportation. Oh, Commissioner Willie just joined for that single topic. Goodbye, Commissioner Willie.
I did. Thank you very much, Chair.
So as for the record, there are 4 commissioners in attendance now.
Right here. Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Stephen Roberts, Director of Land Use and Transportation. I'm joined by Aaron Wardell, our Assistant Director. I have what we hope will be a relatively quick briefing for you today. One of the primary objectives is really to get your board input on another letter regarding some concerns that our staff have expressed to you previously with transportation connectivity in the Cooper Mountain Community Plan area that's being managed by the City of Beaverton. So just real quickly, we'll talk a little bit about the plan itself, a little bit about the county's role in working with the city in the planning process, outline what the concerns are that we have expressed, and then outline some potential next steps for your board, which again is that potentially sending a letter to Beaverton City Council. So the Cooper Mountain Community Plan area was an urban reserve area that was added to the Metro Urban Growth Boundary as part of Metro's 2018 expansion decision. It's about 1,200 total acres. A significant portion of it is constrained lands, and you can sort of see that on the map here, areas that are sort of depicted in the light green color. There are multiple small streams that come off the top of Cooper Mountain that run through this area. And so out of the 1,200 acres, my recollection is about half of that is really prime, sort of well suited for development. About half is constrained in some way. It is an area that the city is assuming that could have around 5,000 housing units and about 10,000 total residents as it develops out over time. So the city began its Cooper Mountain community plan process in 2020, but it really built on a number of prior planning studies that are mentioned in the memo that was attached to our board materials today. But really going back to the South Cooper Mountain Community Plan, there was sort of a broad look at the larger Cooper Mountain area, including North Cooper Mountain, South Cooper Mountain, and sort of the middle Cooper Mountain, which is the area we're discussing with you today. So there have been a number of studies looking at this over time. Those plans have evolved over time as you go from general to more specific, and we're now at the point where the city is on the cusp of approving its community plan. So that would be what we might normally refer to as the comprehensive plan, adopting the transportation system plan amendments, zoning amendments, comprehensive land use map amendments, that sort of thing. So this is one of the final steps that would open the property up for development. So a little bit about the county's role. So the county, are considered a service provider for purposes of transportation in this area. We manage the arterial streets that surround the area and including one that bisects the area, which is 175th Avenue. But the other county arterials that directly abut this site are Grabhorn Road and Tile Flat Road. Jules Ferry Road, just to the south, is also another county facility. So in preparation for this planning work, the city and the county entered into an intergovernmental agreement that delegated transportation planning responsibility for this new urban expansion area from the county to the city. And then our staff have been participating in a technical committee along the way through the Cooper Mountain community planning process. So as we've looked at this, we've identified a couple of concerns. The first we've sort of labeled as a partnership concern, and that really comes back to the terms of the intergovernmental agreement that we entered into with Beaverton. Our agreement was to delegate the transportation planning authority to the city with an expectation that the city and county would come to agreement on the basic transportation network within the planning area, and then that we would agree on access management standards for those county arterial streets. At this point, we find ourselves, as I said, pretty close to the culmination of this process, and we still are not at a place where county and city staff are in alignment on the transportation elements of the plan. And it notes here, we've been sharing our comments both in writing and in some of the advisory committee meetings and subsequent meetings with staff. And I want to acknowledge, obviously, given the multiple constraints that I mentioned earlier, that these are not simple trade-offs that the city is asked to evaluate. They're really looking at how to weigh or balance the variety of different issues that are needed when you bring a new area into the urban growth boundary. So knowing that there are those 5,000 units and 10,000 people coming, what are the infrastructure needs that need to be done? And what's the best way to try to balance those demands with the interest and almost obligation, if you will, to try to help preserve natural resources in that area. So these are not easy trade-offs. And so I just want to acknowledge that. So our concerns really stem around a particular collector street connection, and I'll show you a map on a subsequent slide, but it's also in your print or in your packet materials if you wanted to look. And so there's a collector connection that was shown in some prior planning efforts, and so we felt that it was an important connection And as I said, as we've gone through from the more general to the more specific planning, that connection has dropped out of the city's plan. And that really does get back to weighing the trade-offs between sort of the transportation and infrastructure systems and connectivity and trying to figure out how to balance that against the natural resource protection interest as well. And so we do have some concerns, and these are things that are what are sort of concerns about meeting standards are really revolve around concerns about safety and livability. So I want to be clear when we talk about not meeting standards, it's not just the fact that this may not meet with our standards, but also that we're concerned about the knock-on effects of that. So in this neighborhood, in this plan, there will be a neighborhood, and again, I'll show you a map on a subsequent slide that creates a kind of somewhat isolated neighborhood that will not have a vehicular connection back to the rest of the larger Cooper Mountain area. That area would consist of about somewhere between the city estimating between 610 and 730 new housing units, and there is some potential commercial use within that area as well. And the concern that we have is that it creates that community with a fairly sizable number of residents, generating a fairly sizable number of vehicle trips that really will have to rely solely on access to Grabhorn Road. Grabhorn Road is, if I'm sure you're mostly familiar with it, it's a very narrow 2-lane road right now. Obviously, with development, there will be improvements made to the urban side of the road, but the west side of the road will remain rural. It's outside the UGB, and so we will not be able to make urban level improvements on the west side of that road. The number of trips on that road could potentially double, honestly, with the construction of these housing units in this particular neighborhood alone. And the traffic volumes are already growing pretty rapidly as there's been a number of other urban expansions down in that area. So it's really, there's a compounding effect that's happening here too. So I mentioned the neighborhood would lack connection back to the rest of the Cooper Mountain, the larger Cooper Mountain area. So that translates to not just vehicles, people that are needing to go from home to work, work to home, or whatever, but also things like school buses. This is an interesting area. It will be in the city of Beaverton, but about 2/3 or half of the area will be in the Hillsborough School District. So the Hillsborough School District will serve this one neighborhood that's kind of off to itself, but also serving significant other portions of the new development area as well. So we'll be asking for school buses, for instance, to take out of direction trips to be able to serve those two communities. There's also just really the inability for emergency services, delivery vehicles, garbage trucks, and just the community members to be able to traverse back and forth even within this new community. I mentioned the housing could more than double those existing trips on Grabhorn Road, so that's obviously one of the compounding effects here. And then the street connections that are proposed to Grabhorn, and I'll point these out on the map slide, as I mentioned, do not meet the county's access standards. And that puts the county in a position of having to work with future developers at some point to do additional traffic studies and safety analysis to try to help justify access points that don't comply with the county's requirements for the reasons I mentioned above, more about safety and livability concerns as much as the compliance itself. And so we are worried that by forcing all of those trips onto Grabhorn Road with its challenges and with growing traffic, we do have some concerns about being sort of put in a position of having to negotiate with a developer through the extra evaluation and steps that would be required in order to approve access to Grabhorn Road. So this is the long-awaited map. And so the red dotted line, and it's labeled collector connection, that indicates a location where this connection could be located. We've sketched it in this location because it sort of follows the path of a proposed bicycle and pedestrian connection that would cross McKernan Creek there, but connect up those two different parts of the community together. That existing collector, or the collector street that continues further south from that arrow, eventually sort of makes its way, winds down, and eventually connects to Shullsbury Road at Mountainside Way near the Beaverton High School. And then that connection will be extended into River Terrace on the Tigard side, on the south side of Chase Ferry Road in the future. So we've sketched the location in there where that proposed bicycle connection is and the crossing at McKernan Creek. There is an existing private road that has a creek crossing there now. And so some of the thinking about picking that particular location just has to do with there's already an existing disturbance of the natural area. This could be an opportunity to take that existing impediment and actually enhance and improve it, but still maintaining this vehicular connection back and forth. And of course, it would also serve as a bicycle pedestrian connection. So we think that there are ways to incorporate this and still make it something that would not be a huge detriment to the objective of trying to preserve some of those natural areas. And then just quickly, these are just some of the earlier plans where a collector connection, not in the specific location that we've sketched on the other map, but the connection itself was there. And so again, earlier in this process, our staff had a feeling that we were marching along with this direction. And then again, as I mentioned, in that process of evaluating different trade-offs, this connection was removed from the preferred concept plan that is being moved forward at this time. So I have talked a lot and want to pause and give you all a chance to ask any questions. And then, as I mentioned, Chair, we have a draft letter at the end of your packet that we're looking to get your direction on for the City Council meeting for their upcoming hearing on December 3rd.
We need to go right to the potential next step slide and consideration of the draft letter. But first, any questions from anyone on what? Okay, so the draft letter. Commissioner Treese's thumbs up. Commissioner Rogers, Commissioner Fye? Commissioner
do-
Fye's thumbs up.
I do have a general question.
Yes, sir.
You're going to have, every time you're going to have an expansion, no matter where it is in the county, you're going to have these same sort of conflicts. And the conflict is that the county maintains these roads that are really market roads and very narrow roads. Forgetting this, I'm a thumbs up on the letter, but what are you going to do not to have this over and over and over again?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to always turn over the planning? Are you going to, I'm just curious. I mean, you had it in Tigard, and now you got it in Beaverton, you're probably going to get it in Hillsborough, you're going to get it elsewhere.
Yeah, I think you raise a great point, Chair or Commissioner, and I do think that, we want to continue exploring ways to continue to be a good partner. We want to be there to support our cities that are doing this work. We've just been talking about the housing crisis and need to provide housing. And so we clearly want to be supportive of all of those objectives, working with our partner cities. I think there may be some opportunities for us to just continue to think about how we can potentially try to bring a little bit more certainty earlier in the process.
My recommendation, because I won't be here to see all this, but I would hope that at the very outset that you don't assign all transportation, especially when it affects county facilities, all transportation rights over the cities, that you have some kind of an agreement that you have to have a mutual understanding how they affect each other's facilities. Because that's what the problem is. That really is the problem. What they want to do interior, that's okay to me, but when it starts affecting county roads, that's where it becomes an issue. So I just throw that out, but I'm fine with the
Well,
letter.
I think what you're getting at is we have an approach that we've used to date for posing the conditions for the UGB expansions to Metro. Okay,
Yeah, good
and-
partners.
right. And we're experiencing that in this one that's this one that's complicated more by virtue of streams than other areas we've seen in a long time. Is you're suggesting some improved language to really get at the need for mutual agreement.
Yes.
And I think that's great. So could you take that as board direction
Absolutely.
for those future condition requests.
Yeah. And I do want to highlight, Commissioner, we had an agreement, and in the past, I think we've generally not found ourselves this late in the process not being pretty supportive of where the city direction is going. We've had the couple of recent instances you've highlighted. And so I think that as we're developing these agreements going into it early on, again, maybe it just needs to be a little bit more explicit, or there may need to be some additional um, um, remedies, if you will, for getting to a place where we're not in agreement at the end of a process. So I think those are definitely things that are already on our minds, and I appreciate the direction to continue exploring that.
I have a minor question about the IGA, Stephen. I'm thumbs up on the letter, and I had both sat down with you and got a really robust briefing. You took a lot of questions from us and gave us a lot of information. The concern you called out in terms of the partnership concerns, that slide, the two things that you called out. I was reading the IGA, and it said the city and county will agree on a future multimodal transportation network to support the UGB expansion area and adopt road alignments, comma, functional class, comma, and lane numbers into city and county transportation system plans. So like, I would like to have a window to when this was being put together to try to figure out how would a county system transportation plan would agree on a city. But like, if the city says this fits in with our transportation system plan, and then we're saying this fits in our transportational system plan, where do we go from there?
We're
Right.
saying it doesn't, correct?
Right. I think we're saying we have concerns that
Concerns.
isn't compliant
Yeah.
with our expectations. Right. And I think, again, in the context of, I'll back up maybe one slide. So I think, and again, just a reminder that as we were having these discussions around that we'll agree on a network, I think we were looking at maps that looked like this and thinking, looks fine. And so I think that, hindsight being 2020, I don't think foresaw that we would find ourselves in the place that we are today.
Yeah, which is also different. That map is different, if I'm reading it correctly, I could be wrong, than the map in the IGA. IGA had a map in,
Yes.
which is
And
different than that one. So I don't know
Correct.
which was being off from this one or that which was the correct map.
yeah.
This is earlier in time, right? If we talk about the sequence,
Right.
Metro makes the UGB expansion, and that's based off of the concept plan. Okay. Then, as he mentioned, there are multiple areas that have been planned, and there have been multiple iterations of Beaverton's plan, and that's what he's showing here. So, as the letter talks about, the IGA used language to speak to, both have to agree. The reality is they're moving forward with a proposal where they agree with themselves, but we don't agree with them.
Yeah, and I apologize. I didn't bring my copy of the agreement with me, so I'm not exactly sure what the map. I don't recall exactly what the map in that document looked like, but
I think there was a part of your question too, though, on transportation system plan adoption and how that works between the city and the county. So typically with these UGB expansion areas, the way the process works is the city adopts their comprehensive plan or community plan, as Beaverton is calling it, and then the county updates our TSP to match theirs, at least for roads that are arterials and collectors. We don't always include neighborhood routes, and we don't include local streets. We haven't been, to my knowledge, in a situation where we disagreed with the city's plan to the point where we wouldn't adopt our TSP to correspond with theirs. We've given them land use authority over this area. We expect them to annex it and develop it. So we would expect that at some point, a couple of years from now, when they move forward, we would update our transportation system plan so that they match each other. When our TSP and the city's TSPs don't match each other, we end up with challenges in development review. Exactly in this situation where we'd see development coming in off of a county arterial
So the developers have to work directly with us. We need our plan documents to match. So that's why it's really important for us to work through these challenges.
So you have four of us who are thumbs up on the letter. The one thing that I suggest we change though in the letter is not wording, but rather bring forward on page 2 in paragraph 1 at the very end of line 2.
All right.
Incurring additional development review costs and time. I think that would be good to bold.
Okay.
And then the other request is we've got thumbs up for my signing it on behalf of the board. I think we also need to CC TVFNR and HBA.
Great. Okay.
And
Well,
then once I have the signed version, I'll also send it to, in concert with Ms. Angie, the interim city manager for Tigard, the Tigard mayor, and we'll have to get it to the Tigard planning manager too. You'll have to help me with that name because I don't remember it.
okay. All right. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, we're a little bit ahead of the game. So why don't we do board and leadership? Oh, no, we're not. We're 5 minutes behind. Sorry, I skipped that. Okay. Okay, board and leadership communication. Who would like to go first?
I can go. I can get my notes out. Well, I will start with yesterday. I had the opportunity to go to the Beaverton shelter ground opening in District 1. Great turnout, very well organized. I was surprised or confused rather why I wasn't given the opportunity to speak when it rose. That was really a poor reflection of our board and extreme failure to demonstrate inclusivity and respect. I think the people of Washington County deserve better from us and we need to do better.
So I'll speak to that. It was a decision that I made in real time in response to hearing how the opportunity was being spoke about at the same time that we're dealing with these SHS changes. And I made the real-time call. I needed to reach out to a board member right away and have that board member see my text right away. And the only board member who I could make visual contact with was Commissioner Treese. And I also knew that if I texted her, it would buzz her watch. So I texted her right away and she came right over and I texted her that I needed her to deliver the talking points because I thought, given the juxtaposition, particularly as Metro Council President Peterson was pushing reducing the SHS measure, that I would not be as successful in delivering the talking points as I expect myself to do as the elected chair for all of Washington County. So Commissioner Treese was willing to step in and deliver them. So it has nothing to do with anything more than those logistics.
Missed opportunity again, missed opportunities. Yesterday, I also went to WCCC meeting and nothing for board decisions or anything, just for board awarenesses. They had their votes, the mayors and the cities voted who will be representing WCCC on JPAC. And Jeff Delane, Mayor of Cornelius, and Mayor Heidi Luke was chosen as the alternate. And I think there was a letter that staff sent to us that we'll forward.
Yes, we received 2 communications from staff.
And then last week there was TV Highway, and it was no board decisions on that one too. Very informational discussion related. So board decision wise on the committee.
Does that project have an end point?
TV Highway. The end point is getting the LPA finalized, jurisdictions agreeing on the budget. I think it's on our rolling agenda, Chair, to come that project to come to us to figure out the funding strategy the staff are entertaining. And then as a board, we'll eventually have to make a decision on what kind of a commitment in terms of funding we're willing to commit to that. And then it's not just Washington County, the cities would have to also commit to their portion of it. And then the state and the TriMet. So a lot of difficult conversation, or sort of not even difficult, but funding related conversation coming to us. But it is, rest assured, it is on our rolling agenda, and we will have a funding strategy. And I think the end point will be when we submit to the federal, they say yes to it. So, and then even that maybe doesn't end.
So Clerk Moss has committed to get us the updated rolling agendas for our December roundtable. So all we have right now are the rolling agendas through December. So thank you very much for speaking to if this project has milestones that continue into 2025. Much appreciated.
Yeah. I think, well, I'm looking at the staff down there, but that's all. That concludes my updates.
Great. Who's next?
Okay.
Mine's fast. An opportunity, I think you can see this all on my calendar anyway. Just to pass a little bit of knowledge along to both the chair of the Washington County Chamber Transportation Group as well as the WA Transportation Group about some things I've seen over the years. And I had that lunch yesterday, and that was a good time to spend some time with them and discuss things. I have this week also a Bolton Chamber Advisory Council meeting which is where they discuss the local issues. WEA has a meeting at Rock Creek Thursday, which I'll be in attendance. Probably a lot of you might be there as well. And then let's see, there's also a Twalton Chamber meeting they've asked me to come to. That's their board meeting on Thursday. And I have a House Bill 217 Transit Advisory Committee. I'm confused at best on what that's going to be about because we've already adopted all the plans for next year. We've done everything, but Tom Mills is having a meeting. So I will be there to hear what it's about.
Well, maybe they're trying to address what might transition that committee over with a new transportation funding bill. If everything is sorted out, then.
That might be. Yeah, that might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, good guess.
That was just a guess, so.
Yeah, I don't know. It might be.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Rogers. Who's next?
I believe I am. The week of November 11th, I attended the CPO 1 meeting, and Clean Water Services did a presentation there. It was very well received, I think. There's some issues with several residents in CPO 1, or excuse me, in CPO 7, and this was a joint meeting of the two. So those issues remain to be discussed. I attended the Regional Solutions Advisory Committee meeting, and we are in the process of determining what the project scope, what projects the group wants to look at. And so we're up here funneling down. So I suspect that funnel process will take a couple meetings. One of the ideas was to address local taxes. It was a little it was like way up in the sky, you know. So this was more like property taxes, sales tax. So my point is that we need to do some realistic scoping here. So the impact meeting was November 13th. We talked about the community connector transit study and the regional housing coordination strategy. That was the OHNA requirement of the regional government. I have those documents if you're interested. One thing that I want to point out about impact that is pertinent to us is that in attending the coordinating council meeting this morning, the December meeting, which is December 11th, we will have a presentation from President Peterson on SHS. Now, I have asked for continuing updates on the SHS process over the last several months as chair. And at this point, what I asked for was, I don't want any more updates. I want impact to hear from President Peterson, and I want impact members to have the opportunity to ask questions. So that it was originally scheduled for 30 minutes. We are extending that to 45 minutes, and I anticipate it might even go longer than that. But I wanted to get that on your radar as well, if you in consideration of, at that point in time, providing testimony. I went to the HBA housing forecast. It was, chair was there. It was a huge room. I was in the cheap seats, which was fine. It was, the presentation was really about forecast, and they had a national economist along with our local economist, Josh Lehner, and it was very interesting, but I don't see that we're going to be changing how we do business over the next year to 3 years. Or you may have a different opinion coming out of that meeting. This week I attended as Commissioner Fye mentioned, the Beaverton year-round shelter grand opening. What's amazing is the impact that shelter is going to have, and the way the shelter is built. You walk in and you have a sense of dignity in the room. It's calming colors. It's beautifully laid out. There are beds that are separated. There's locking cabinets. There's a laundry room. There's a commercial kitchen there. There's showers there. So it was really interesting to see that. Pets are also welcome, and there's an outdoor relief area for the pets. There's an outdoor convening area as well. So going from the groundbreaking, which was really a wall breaking at the initial opening, to what I saw yesterday was really impressive. And the hope in the room for addressing our homelessness was real there as well. Yesterday I met along with Zucker with Rep/Senator Lisa Reynolds, along with Mayor Semantle and with Rebecca Collette, primarily about questions that have been raised by Rep Reynolds around the Family Connections program. The conversation was really robust and got to all sorts of issues in the HHS world, but the consistent message was we are in a budget constrained timeframe. We can't afford mandates. We have to look critically at all of our programs and what demands the programs put on the county. For example, in some of these home visits, do we have to have an RN? It's double the cost. Can we get more services for the same amount of money. So, and she was very receptive to the discussion, and it was, I think, met our ends as well. I am leaving on vacation tomorrow. I'll be gone tomorrow, Thursday and Friday, and back on Monday and Tuesday, and gone again on Wednesday. Next week, I have a meeting with, we're okay, and looking forward to that, as well as I'm going to be saying a few words at the Sheriff's Office employee recognition and swearing in. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to share an update from Commissioner Willie with regard to the SHS draft letter. I have quickly read the letter and thank you, Aaron and Molly et al. For crafting this in quick fashion. The letter reflects all of the complexity that this resolution creates, and I'm hopeful that Metro and Here Together / PMC will be open to modifications that will benefit the region and allow Washington County to continue its great work. I agree to approve the letter. Thank you, Commissioner Willie. Additionally, Council President Peterson did just share 2 scenarios, with second scenario being 225 million versus 250 million. And she has reiterated her request. In addition, Chair Smith just supplied her email to Council President Peterson of yesterday, thanking her for the recap email, reiterating she wasn't able to attend last Thursday meeting because of a dental emergency, hence why Commissioner Schrader had attended. She got filled in by her staff, and that her board has not had the opportunity to go over this. They're attending the AOC conference, and therefore, and she's canceled certain meetings. So as a result, she won't be able to have discussion with them until the Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. Therefore, as I had understood from the Tri-County Chair meeting meeting Monday night, that all 3 of the counties are not prepared to speak to the full scenarios that Council President Peterson has directed us to come prepared to discuss this Thursday. But we're doing our best. So first, for my report out, I want to thank our staff for the CPO modernization presentations that they did at an in-person meeting, as well as for the virtual listening session. I attended part of that last week. It was very well done in all regards. I did have an opportunity to pass my thanks on to Amanda Garcia Snell, but I know multiple staff members have been involved with that. I attended the HBA Housing Forum, and a couple of comments from that. While the panel of economists noted that our population growth moving forward at 0.5 to 0.6% is their word mediocre, in stark contrast to the positioning from PMC, that it's incredibly stark terms. The economist said this is reasonable, but what's important is to note that the pattern has shifted, that pandemic shifts are permanent, and the question of where do young people want to live, whereas it used to be the Pacific Northwest, it's no longer the case, and they're opting instead to go to the Sun Belt. So those were a couple of important notables that I got out of that. SHS TCPB had a meeting last week and moved forward with additional training and other programs, which, as we just discussed, could very well be at risk with the SHS reform. got the ETV board meeting tomorrow, our annual housing forum, which only two of us plan to attend this year, has two really interesting panels. So I'm really glad to go to that. And then lastly, I just want to mention we've got clarity on the House District 34 timing. So I'd like to turn it over to Commissioner Clerk Moss for a moment before going to leadership communication. And thank you again, Commissioner Treese, for in real time delivering those talking points yesterday.
Right. Thank you, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. So to follow up on the appointment of Lisa Reynolds from last Thursday night, that position that she fills, she resigned her current term but she was reelected on November 3rd to a new term. So the Secretary of State's office called me late Friday, and they are evaluating the clarity of the state law. So they have high confidence that the appointment for that, because they have to finish their certification, will likely not take place until January of next year once the new session starts. So that is what we're looking forward to plan. This meeting will be the majority Washington County led and directed with 1,000 voters of Maloma. So it'll be clearly your decision and discretion of what you want to do.
Yep. So we're planning accordingly for a January date.
Oh,
Yes, you'll be off in the palm tree like Commissioner Willie. Right now. So, all right, leadership communication.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I have a couple updates for you today, the first of which is one on avian influenza. So recently, Clackamas County found a human case of influenza called highly pathogenic avian influenza, or HPAI, or H5N1. Nationally, there have been 53 of these cases since 2022. Most cases are from people working directly in a chicken or a dairy farm, and there are no reports of people with H5N1 causing illness in other people, human transmission. Washington County is working closely with the Oregon Health Authority, the Oregon Department of Agriculture, and regional counties. To prepare for the possibility of more cases of H5N1, Washington County is also getting more medicine to treat it, and the county is fully prepared to provide education to those who are ill and keep track of any cases or outbreaks should they occur. And of course, we'll keep you updated on that. Second update is good news. For 45 years, the Office of Community Development has successfully administered federal funds allocated to the county by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. The office continued the tradition this year with receiving HUD's approval on its Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, or the CAPER. This report highlights community projects and programs completed in the past year with funding provided by HUD, and it demonstrates compliance with both federal requirements and the county's 2020 to 2024 consolidated plan. Since 2020, community development has administered $16.3 million in funding that supported a variety of programs and services benefiting 43,254 county community members. Some of those examples, as your board is probably aware, is water line replacement in Banks, the Just Compassion Safe Parking Program in Tigard, Planbeck Gardens Affordable Housing Project in Tualatin, and services through the court-appointed special advocates, or CASA. And that concludes my updates for today.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Commissioners. We're after your break. We're going to have 2 executive sessions, so we'll do the bulk of my updates then, and with support of my team, with the County Council team. But I did want to highlight one success we recently had, and that is in relation to the recovery of the back transient lodging taxes that we were owed by the 2 Hampton Inns, one in Sherwood and one in Tigard. Mr. Bush worked successfully with the cities and filed lawsuits for those past amounts. And last week, both hotels paid their amounts in full. We're confirming that what they've paid also covers our penalties and interest payments. And then we'll work to get their amounts distributed to the cities per the ordinance and dismiss those lawsuits. So small successes, but meaningful successes. One more just quick reminder, as I mentioned last week, our office is moving to the 2nd floor. We packed yesterday. Everyone rolled up their sleeves and we got it done in record time. And so we will be off site tomorrow for the most part while they move our things. I heard while you were in your session earlier that they were already starting to move IT equipment downstairs. So they're already working in haste, and we will be settled early next week fully. That's it for me.
Clean Water Services.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, and good afternoon, Clean Water Services Board of Directors. We have two short updates. The first one is our annual leaf disposal and food drive has two more drop-off opportunities. On November 23rd from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We'll be at the Home Depot at Science Park, Indian Hills Elementary School, and also at the CWS field operations. And the final opportunity is on December 7th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and will be at the CWS field operations. We typically collect about 2,400 cubic yards of leaves every year, so that's about 240 dump truck loads. So this service helps to with the leaf collection and to help with localized flooding caused by leaf clogged storm drains. And there's more information available on our website for the public. The second one is that field operations staff are gearing up to respond to calls and clearing catch basins in anticipation of the reported steady heavy rainfall and high winds that will occur tonight through Friday, with projections for 1.5 to 3.5 inches of rain. So grab your raincoats and we'll might have a blistery next few days. So, and that concludes my report.
Terrific. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, well, we will now take our break for 15 minutes till 3:05. So we're a little ahead of schedule. Would staff be available to go right into exec
I
session?
believe so. I'm checking right now.
Okay, so that means I would like to ask for a motion. I'm going to ask for two different motions and we'll do the executive session serially, but we'll take care of both motions now. Executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 sub 2 sub H for the purposes of potential litigation, two of those in fact. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please vote by raising your hand. Thank you, commissioners. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 4-0. So at 3:05, we'll go into exec session. Thank you.